It is day 53. That's not what it feels like, though, in this whirlwind of President Trump's second term. And now some of his swing state supporters are expressing some buyer's remorse. They're sounding off in a focus group co-conducted by Axios. It's a group that consisted of 13 voters from battleground Michigan who voted for Joe Biden in 2020, but then for Donald Trump last year.
Axios reported that most expressed frustration and worry using words like erratic, frightening, disruptive, and dictator to describe their concerns.
It's getting to the point where I'm almost scared to watch the news.
A lot of his actions have just been disruptive and creating chaos.
I don't think anyone would have voted for him if they expected to see what we're seeing now.
I was voting for him based off of the economy the first time around, and I'm seeing a significant decline.
It's very scary.
Yikes. Donald Trump continues to face nightmare news, not just in the form of devastating polling, but also his own voters turning on him publicly over his mismanagement of the economy. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, as we've been discussing, Donald Trump has had the shortest presidential honeymoon in recorded history. All right, for context, the polling has been devastating. He is officially underwater. He is not popular. Now, he was more popular at the start of this second term than he ever was during his first term. But Donald Trump is still the least popular president overall in American history since polling has been recorded, okay? And now we're getting this new information from a focus group conducted by Axios. And we're going to talk about this. I want to be clear. This does not mean that the former Biden voters who turned to Trump have any love for the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party has its own issues, okay? But they're not the ones in power. And hopefully they will find the time over the next 2 years to redevelop that brand so that they can win big in the midterms in 2026 and then hopefully eject Trump and J.D. Vance out of the White House in 2028. But let's look at the polling here. Focus group, Trump swing voters in Michigan, a swing state, have buyer's remorse. Michigan swing voters in our latest Engagius Sago focus group said that although they voted for Trump in November, they have objections, frustrations, and fears about his behavior since he returned to power. 10 of the 13 participants from this battleground auto industry state bordering Canada said what they're seeing is not what they thought they were voting for, and they're worried Trump's approach may hurt their pocketbooks. Erratic, frightening, disruptive, and dictator were among the words they used to describe their concerns. A focus group is not a statistically significant sample like a poll, although we will get to the polling, but the voters' reactions suggest Trump risks overplaying his mandate to reshape government, trade, and international alliances. The online panels conducted Tuesday night were made up of Michigan voters who backed former President Biden in 2020 but switched to Trump last November. 8 were self-described independents, 4 were Republicans, and 1 was a Democrat. So again, fairly, I suppose, overall in favor of Trump, right? 4 Republicans to 1 Democrat. The voters' responses stand in stark contrast to last month's focus group with Arizona swing voters, all of whom said they approve of Trump's earliest action. So again, it goes to show what's happened, that short honeymoon that we were talking about, in 1 month's difference. The Michigan voters felt differently after more exposure to Elon Musk, Doge, large-scale federal worker firings, tariffs, and no relief on prices. Trump entered his second term with a higher approval rating than he had during his first term, but polls indicate his honeymoon has begun to fade as Americans' concerns over the over the economy rise. Quote, I don't feel like he was this aggressive last time because I don't think anyone would have voted for him if they expected to see what we're seeing now, said one. Another said, he's so erratic, and it's getting to the point where I'm almost scared to watch the news. I mean, it's a little bit frightening because each day is something new, so you get a bit anxious, said another. Quote, I mean, Canada? When have we ever had issues with Canada? Asked a third. Quote, we barely have a border. You can go in and out of the country in a lot of places, a lot of states. I think we're just barking up the wrong tree with this. Another voter said that bristled at the viral image of a crowned Trump, the president's "Long live the king" comment, Trump saying, "He who lives like a country he who saves his country does not violate any law." A quote attributed to Napoleon. Quote, he is acting like a dictator. So yeah, this is not good news for Trump. Again, the Democratic Party is also struggling immensely right now, but they're not in power. So they have an opportunity to regroup. Really, the focus is on Trump, and Democrats would be smart to continue to make the focus on Trump. With 538 going under, unfortunately, because of ABC downsizing it, I've turned to the Silver Bulletin. I don't like a lot of Nate Silver's commentary because, again, he strikes me as just a centrist who has to grade Republicans and Trump on a curve in order to appear objective. But he is a very respected analyst and aggregator. He's probably the most famous one alive, and he was actually part of 538. So, reluctantly, I am turning to Nate Silver. He says, on balance, it's been another rough day for Donald Trump when it comes to the polls. His approval rating is underwater in the latest CNN SSRS poll, Signal, and YouGov Economist. But in better news for Trump, he rose to a +3 net approval in the latest Rasmussen tracking poll. We've also seen some new evidence that Americans aren't happy with Trump's approach to economic policy. Remember that CNN SSRS poll? It showed that 56% of Americans disapprove of Trump's handling of the economy, while only 44% approve. Across both of his terms, this is the first time a CNN poll has given Trump net negative approval on the economy. And so, again, he's got his own version of what he popularized via 538, and it shows that Donald Trump has a -1 approval rating. So he's underwater by 1 percentage point. Okay. Now, let's turn to, since they mentioned CNN, CNN's got a good piece out, why Trump's greatest first-term strength may be his biggest second-term weakness. And again, this is so important. Remember, you had Trumpflation skyrocketing. You had increasing signs of a Trump recession. Remember, the last recession we experienced was under Trump in term 1. 10 out of the last 11 began under Republican presidents. Little piece of trivia for you. And, of course, the Trump trade war, which is painful and unnecessary. And what's so important about this is, again, Republicans in general have a polling advantage on the economy and have had for decades, despite the fact that Democrats are just objectively better economic stewards. The polling advantage has always been in favor of Republicans. I mean, it's been perfect. They haven't actually had to do the hard work of delivering, and they get to reap all the rewards of the perception. And Trump, who's perceived as this genius billionaire businessman, was even more so elevated with respect to polling perception. And now it's potentially his biggest liability. So, in Trump's first White House term, public confidence in his handling of the economy was always among his greatest strengths. But in the newly days of his second term, public views about his economic performance have quickly become his most conspicuous potential vulnerability. Even before Trump rattled the stock market this week by acknowledging his trade agenda could trigger a recession, several public polls had shown his job approval for managing the economy lagging below his overall job performance rating as president. That's a dramatic reversal from Trump's first term, when approval for his handling of the economy exceeded his overall approval rating every time the CNN, SRSS, Gallup, or CNBC polls asked the public about both over his 4 years. In an early February poll this year, by contrast, Gallup found for the first time that fewer people gave Trump positive marks on the economy than his overall performance, and that his economic grades were lower than at any point during his first 4 years. Likewise, the CNN SRSS poll released Wednesday found Trump's approval rating on the economy, 44%, fell slightly below his overall approval rating, 45%, for the first time in either of his presidential terms, and matched the lowest economic approval rating the survey ever recorded during his first 4 years. Since January, the public's assessment of Trump's economic performance has often come in below his rating for any other major issue, such as immigration or foreign affairs. This early into his term, opinions about Trump's economic management are hardly set in stone. Pollsters agree that most Americans are willing to give him more time to make progress on inflation, the issue that mattered to more of his voters than any other in election day polls. In many surveys, Trump's overall job number is still slightly higher than at this point in his first term, though still below that of any other new president in the history of modern polling. Okay, so again, which is what I was talking about prior to this. But the inversion of the first-term pattern on his economic approval still represents an early warning signal for Trump. It suggests that if he can't make progress against high prices, the same frustration with inflation that sapped support for President Biden could ultimately weaken Trump too, particularly because polls show that most voters do not see Trump prioritizing inflation as much as they do themselves. The fact that the public support for Trump's handling of the economy has dipped so early in his second term is a red flag for him, said longtime Democratic pollster Nick Gorovich. Quote, in the election, there were a ton of different topics, but the number one topic in every single poll with every key group that switched to Trump was economics and inflation. If voters are telling us that they wanted something to change, it was that. So if that doesn't change, and that's where the voters who put you in office wanted you to go, that's a huge problem for him. And indeed it is. And it's something that Democrats, again, should ruthlessly exploit to the best of their ability. Will Trump be able to course correct? It's possible. Again, I'm not a prophet. Number one, I'm not a prophet. Ever since Trump won his first term, which I thought would never happen, I got out of the prophecy business. The second thing is to remember that Trump, I use the phrase political gravity a lot. The rules do apply for Trump in the sense that he can't fly, right? Gravity, he can't politically fly. Political gravity still applies to Trump, but he can bend the rules. So even though he can't politically fly like a superhero, he has limitations. He lost the 2020 election. He lost the popular vote in 2016. He only won the popular vote this time around by a plurality. Democrats have defeated Trump in the 2018 midterms, the 2020 presidential election, the 2021 Senate runoffs, the 2022 midterms, despite Biden's enormous political disadvantages. Democrats did very well in the 2023 off-year elections. So Trump is beatable. Political gravity applies to him, but he can bend the rules in some ways that many people simply can't. He can leap further, right? And he is slower to descend when he jumps. So is it possible that Trump can somehow course correct on this? Yes. And I'm not saying that he can't do it. I'm just saying that as of right now, his honeymoon is over. Democrats should celebrate that and ruthlessly seek to keep that honeymoon from ever returning and politically benefit from it. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.